The United States owns more than 8,000 tons of gold. China owns less than a third of that. But here is what should keep you awake at night. One of these countries is buying gold at the fastest pace in modern history. The other has not added a single ounce in over 50 years. By the end of this video, you will understand which nation is playing defense, which is playing offense, and why the gap between them may not matter nearly as much as Wall Street wants you to believe. Let us start with the raw figures, because they are staggering. The United States holds approximately 8,133 tons of gold. That is the largest official stockpile on Earth. It has sat at that level nearly unchanged since the early 2000s. Some of it rests in Fort Knox, some sits in the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. But here is the critical detail. America is not adding to it this year, not last year, not in any year you can remember. Now look at China. Officially, the People's Bank of China reports just over 2,346 tons as of June 2026. That is roughly 28% of what America holds, but that number has been climbing for 20 consecutive months. 20. The longest buying streak since China began reporting its reserves regularly in 2015. In May alone, Beijing added nearly 10 tons. In June, almost 15 tons more, month after month, ton after ton, while Washington sits still. So what is driving this? The answer's not simple market timing, it is geopolitical survival. In February of 2022, Western governments froze approximately $300 billion in Russian central bank reserves. Those were dollar-denominated assets held in foreign accounts. One day they were liquid, the next day they were not. Every reserve manager on Earth watched that happen, and every reserve manager understood the same lesson. Assets held in another country's currency, inside another country's banking system, are only as safe as your political relationship with that country. Gold changes the equation entirely. Gold held in a sovereign vault answers to no one. It cannot be frozen by sanctions. It cannot be devalued by a foreign central bank. It cannot be seized through a keystroke. That realization moved from theoretical to operationally critical in 2022. And the buying data since then reflects exactly that shift. China holds roughly $3.4 trillion in total foreign exchange reserves. That is an enormous war chest. But the vast majority of it is denominated in US dollars and US Treasuries. In other words, China has spent decades financing the very system it now seeks to reduce its dependence on. Gold is the hedge. Gold is the escape valve. Every ton Beijing moves from treasuries into bullion is a ton that Washington cannot touch. But here is where the official numbers get murky, and this is where you need to pay close attention. China is the world's largest gold producer. It mines roughly 380 tons every single year. Much of that output never leaves the country. It flows through the Shanghai Gold Exchange. It gets absorbed by state-owned entities, and a significant portion never appears in the official central bank report. Analysts at several institutional research desks believe China's actual gold holdings could be 2 to 3 times the official figure. That would put real holdings somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 tons. Not enough to overtake America yet, but close enough to change the strategic math entirely. We have seen this movie before. In July of 2015, the People's Bank of China announced its gold reserves had jumped from 1,054 tons to 1,658 tons. That was a 604-ton increase. It reflected 6 years of undisclosed buying. Beijing simply stopped reporting, accumulated quietly, then revealed the total when it suited them. The precedent for strategic opacity is well established, so when you see 2,346 tons on paper, understand that the real number is almost certainly higher. How much higher? Nobody outside Beijing knows for certain, and that is exactly how Beijing wants it. Now let us flip the lens and look at the United States. Because America's position is stranger than it first appears, the US holds its 8,133 tons at a statutory book value of $42.22 per ounce. That price was set by law in 1973. At today's market price of roughly $4,140 per ounce, that same stockpile is worth approximately $1.16 trillion. That makes it one of the largest unrealized gains on any government balance sheet in the world. and yet America does not touch it. The last full independent audit of US gold reserves was conducted during the Eisenhower administration. Since then, only internal Treasury audits and mint inspections have occurred. No independent third party has ever publicly verified all 8,133 tons. No credible evidence of discrepancy has emerged, but the absence of a modern audit has fueled decades of conspiracy theories, political demands, and public skepticism. Here is the paradox. The country with the most gold is not adding to it. The country with far less gold cannot stop buying it. One nation treats its gold as a museum piece. The other treats it as a weapon. China and America are not alone in this story. They are just the two biggest players on the board. In the first quarter of 2026 alone, central banks worldwide purchased a net 244 tons of gold. That exceeded both the prior quarter and the 5-year average. Poland has been buying aggressively, growing from roughly 103 tons in 2018 to over 580 tons today. Their central bank governor has been explicit. Poland sits on NATO's eastern flank. Gold held in Warsaw cannot be touched by any external power. Uzbekistan now holds over 415 tons. That represents nearly 88% of its total foreign reserves. Turkey, India, Kazakhstan, and Singapore are all steady buyers. The pattern is unmistakable. The countries that did not design the current monetary system are the ones most desperate to insulate themselves from it. Meanwhile, the architects of that system, the United States, Germany, Italy, and France, sit on legacy holdings built during and after the Bretton Woods era. They hold between 69% and 84% of their reserves in gold. They do not need to buy more. They already own the insurance policy. The rest of the world is still shopping for coverage. Let us talk about what this means for the dollar, because that is the unspoken engine behind every Chinese purchase. For decades, the US dollar has been the world's reserve currency. Oil is priced in dollars. International trade is settled in dollars. Central banks hold dollars. That status gives America enormous power. It can borrow cheaply. It can sanction enemies by cutting them off from the dollar clearing system. It can run persistent trade deficits because the world needs its currency. But that power is also a vulnerability. The more the US weaponizes the dollar through sanctions, the more other nations seek alternatives. China is building cross-border payment systems. Russia trades oil in yuan. The BRICS nations openly discuss a gold-backed settlement mechanism. None of this will dethrone the dollar tomorrow, but every ton of gold China adds is a vote of no confidence in the current arrangement. And every month of buying sends a signal to other nations that the smart money is preparing for a different future. Gold is not just an asset for China, it is a narrative tool. It is a way to say, we are building something that does not depend on you. Now, let us be honest about what could slow this down or reverse it. First price. Gold traded near $5,500 per ounce in January of 2026. It pulled back to roughly $4,000 by late June. When prices spike, central banks sometimes pause. China did exactly that in mid-2024, halting purchases for 6 months after 18 consecutive months of buying. They resumed in November of that year, so the streak is not guaranteed to continue forever. Second, China's domestic gold market has cooled recently. Gold exchange-traded funds in China saw net outflows, exceeding 10 billion yuan in late May and early June. Physical withdrawals from the Shanghai Gold Exchange dropped to their lowest level since February of 2020, the early COVID period. Some of that is seasonal. Some is profit-taking after the January peak, but it shows that Chinese retail investors are not blindly bullish. Third, America could theoretically sell gold. It has not done so in any meaningful way since the 1970s, but the option exists. If the US ever faced a true fiscal crisis, liquidating even a fraction of its reserves could flood the market and crash prices. It is an unlikely scenario, but it is not impossible. So where does this leave us? Let me give you the framework I use to think about this. The headline number says America wins 8,133 tons versus roughly 2,346 tons. That is a gap of nearly 6,000 tons. At current prices, that represents over $800 billion in value. On paper, it is not even close, but the trajectory tells a different story. China has added roughly 300 tons in the past 20 months alone. At that pace, it would take roughly 32 years to close the gap, but that assumes America never sells and China never accelerates. Both assumptions are questionable. More importantly, the gap in percentage terms is what matters for monetary independence. America holds 83% of its reserves in gold. China holds roughly 9%. Even if China's hidden reserves double the official number, it would still be under 20%. That means China has far more room to buy and far more incentive to keep buying. The real question is not who has more gold today, it is who will need more tomorrow. And on that score, the answer is clear. Here is what I want you to remember. The United States built its gold empire in a different era. It was the spoils of victory after World War II. It was the anchor of Bretton Woods. It was the foundation of dollar supremacy. And for decades, that foundation has required no maintenance. America sits on its gold like a family heirloom, rarely dusted, never expanded. China is building something different. It is building a shield against sanctions, a shield against dollar volatility, a shield against a financial system it did not design and does not control. Every ton of gold is another layer of that shield, and 20 consecutive months of buying suggests Beijing is not finished. The gap in tons is massive, the gap in urgency is wider, and in a world where financial weapons are replacing military ones, urgency may matter more than inventory. If you find the video useful, give my team a sub.